Warning: the following film contains content or materials that may not be suitable for all viewers. The following may also contain content or materials that may be for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to Unspoken, Unknown, Untold. I am Keeper, the guardian of all things hidden. I hope you enjoy immersing yourself in tonight's most sweetest dreams or most tantalizing nightmares.
Beast Hunger. The advertisement was like something from the 90s. You had a disheveled businessman in a gray office building. In front of him was a microwave, and inside of that microwave was just the blandest gray dinner. He sighed, shoulders slouching as the timer counts down, only 3 seconds remaining. 3, 2, 1. But before the microwave beeped, the wall behind the man exploded and a werewolf in overalls would explode through the wall. The beast threw back his head and howled as the man looked on with fear, but soon realized why the monster appeared. In his grasp was a steaming plastic black bowl of white cheddar mac and cheese with chunks of bacon. The man accepted this bowl, scooped a big forkful of the gooey food into his mouth, and released a howl. Beast's Hunger. The advertisement had done its job, because Dave remembered it so vividly, as he stood alone in the bright aisle. He had only stopped at the pharmacy to pick up rubbing alcohol, lighters, and maybe orange juice for the cold he felt creeping into his throat and head. But took one of the black boxes from the freezer as he looked it over, considering one more item. On the front, in a font that was more fitting on a heavy metal album cover, read, Beasts Hunger. The mac and cheese looked far too good in the box's picture, but he knew well enough to fall for that old trick. This was probably just a masculine lean dinner that were usually marketed on TV during soap operas. Dave could hear the attractive women softly laugh into their frozen chicken and broccoli pasta dinner. He flipped the box over and read the instructions. At a glance, they seemed easy enough to follow. He already had visions of buying 5 of these from an actual grocery store weekly and bringing them to work for lunch. He bought 1 box of Beast Hunger, with his lighters and rubbing alcohol, and made his way home. The line was long, and he had gotten hungry, as he found himself daydreaming about getting home and watching some more of his show. It was his day off, and he had planned on just watching TV and napping. Getting loaded on cheese and carbs before said nap made him excited. Dave made a beeline for his kitchen. Putting down the plastic bag, he reached into his bag. Taking out the black box, he moved to his microwave, so he could begin lunch, or breakfast. This would have been the first thing he would have eaten all day. Opening the box, Dave pulled out the cold plastic bowl. It was a bit frosty, so he couldn't see the pre-recommended eating temperature. Placing the bowl down, he'd pick up the box to remind himself of the instructions. Peel back plastic. Heat for 3.5 minutes. Take out and stir. Heat for 2 more minutes. Let dish cool down. Enjoy your beast's meal. He noticed the asterisk and arched a brow quizzically. Pulling the box closer to his face, Dave read the bottom of the box out loud to his empty apartment. Best served if thoroughly heated. We cannot be held accountable for any discrepancies if product isn't prepared per the directions. If the product is not heated for at least 5 minutes, hunger cannot be properly satisfied. Therefore, Naughton Foods cannot be held accountable for unsatisfied hungers. Dave almost couldn't finish reading because of the chuckle that had formed within his stomach. Were they for real? The font was small at the bottom, not a part of the brick of edgy buzzwords next to the instructions, but a part of all the copyright stuff and ingredients. They must have really been dedicated to this weird marketing campaign. There was even a hotline number listed just in case there was an emergency. So, he began to follow the instructions. He pulled back the plastic film that covered the black plastic bowl, and he could see the white frozen cheese, the spiral noodles, and the little glaciers of pink bacon. It didn't look great, but it was only frozen. Covering it again, Dave set the cooking time to 3 minutes and sat back, leaning against the countertop opposite the microwave. It hummed as the numbers counted down from 3 minutes. He had pulled his phone from his jeans pocket to surf the web while he waited. Before he knew it, the machine would beep. He took it out and it smelled absolutely delicious. Dave's eyes widened when he looked down at the frozen meal, now cooked. It looked delicious. The white cheese was gooey, the noodles were soft but not soggy, like you normally got in these disgusting frozen dinners, and the bacon looked crunchy. Plus, now that it wasn't frozen, the man could see that the portion was pretty big. He moved a metal fork through the noodles, steaming cheese, and chunks of meat. It looked done. Hell, it looked delicious. He dragged the fork through the creamy meal, not finding any frozen islands within the mac. Impressive at how downright cooked the food was, Dave just decided to dig in. It was delicious. He was so surprised at how much he enjoyed the pasta. He didn't even care that he had the slightest intolerance to lactose. Dave knew he'd pay for it later. Now he'd just worry about eating. Swallowing his mouth full, he licked his lips of the cheese before going in for more. Soon all the noodles would be gone, just little pools of cheese and a few small pebbles of bacon. The fork wasn't enough. He'd just pick up the plastic bowl to lick it clean. Dave swore softly as he leaned back once again. The man placed a hand onto his stomach as he just stared at the empty bowl. He licked a plate clean like some kind of dog, which he had not done since high school, at least. Sighing through his nostrils, he swallowed the saliva that formed in his mouth. He was still hungry. He should have bought a second one. He was a grown-ass man, after all. Hours had passed, and it was almost time to get settled into bed. Dave had snacked multiple times since his meal, while he watched his shows, but he still felt hungry. So much so his stomach gargled. He was starting to get worried. He didn't think you could get parasite from a TV dinner, but it was his first thought. Absent-mindedly chewing his nail, Dave would begin to pace. It was early December, and it was a bit cool outside, but fuck, he was sweating. The heat wasn't on, but Dave felt like he was going to melt. Pulling on his hair, he stopped in the middle of his apartment. He didn't know if it was his stomach, or maybe from somewhere in the room, but he heard a growl. Fuck. The room felt like it was spinning, and his head hurt, but this wasn't like your normal migraine. It felt like something wanted to get out. There was a newfound pressure within his head, it felt like his brain was expanding. The pain grew so intense, he had to sit down upon his knees, and as soon as he did he'd lurch forward onto his hands. Dave closed his eyes and let the contents of his stomach go. He heard the splash of vomit upon his carpet, and that only made him sicker, coaxing out more bile as he heaved his shoulders. Sniffling, he'd open his eyes slowly and instantly regretted it. Despite the tears that currently clouded his gaze, Dave's lips parted as he looked down at the puddle of black beneath his palms and face. He fell back onto his rear and began to scoot back as he desperately wiped at his mouth, suddenly tossed into the mystery of what the fuck came out of me? Nervously, and not without a struggle, Dave did his best to breathe. What the fuck? He asked, out to the low light of his apartment. There would be no answer, just his whimpers. Whimpers then turned into screams of agony, as if someone had twisted his arm off. The sounds of joints popping would fill the air, and all Dave could do was scream in pain and confusion. Jesus Christ! First his knuckles popped, and his fingers began to elongate, as if 5 individual nails were being slowly driven out from his fingertips, with unseen pliers. He just watched and screamed for help for anyone to come and relieve him of the torture, suddenly inflicted on him for what felt like no reason. He cried out, as he watched his fingers refuse to give in, and just tear from whatever was trying to leave his body. In that time, he'd also feel himself grow even hotter than before. He felt like someone had lit him on fire. He shrieked as he clawed at his clothes. He yanked at his shirt and peeled it away, as tears streaked his cheeks, his cries now howls. He was frankly growing exhausted from this pain, and receiving no answer to his cries for help or pleas for death. Like his fingers, his toes began to feel like they were growing too fast for his body to adjust to, and his palms began to extend upwards, as if they didn't want to be left behind by the fingers. Dave, at this point, was twitching on his side, as he felt a sharp pain within his stomach. This was the one pain he was familiar with, but he was certain it was punishment from being lactose intolerant. He opened his mouth to speak, cry out, or beg for what was happening to end again, but all that left him was a low, guttural noise. Before he could even question what sound left his lips, Dave felt forced to bare his teeth. He grinned without joy, as his teeth began to grow into each other. Soon, his mouth felt far too small to accommodate the growing jaw, so it too would grow forward. Soon, it felt as if a large cone was being pushed through the middle of his face. Slapping his hands onto the side of his head, Dave gave another nightmarish groan, as his spindly, pointed fingers clutched his hair, which seemed to begin to grow longer. Hell, all over his body he noticed that what hairs were already on his arms and chest had seemed longer, and areas where hair didn't seem to grow now had bloody patches of hair that seemed to just push out from his skin. Not hair. Fur. His pitiful excuse for a breath would get caught in his throat as he watched as the fur continued to force his skin to tear. There was finally a knock at the door. He couldn't hear them over the pounding noise of a heartbeat in his ears, but from the rate they were knocking and the tone of their shouting, whoever was knocking was more angry than concerned that someone was making so much ruckus at this hour. He'd cry out and plead, but he could tell what came out wasn't English. Nor was it any language. No. He just howled out among his tears and whimpers. And panting. The furry mess panted upon the floor as he tried to drag himself to the door, upon hands that felt like they were tipped with knives. The door felt so far away as he pulled his body across the floor. Just now towards the door, the banging would stop, and Dave would just catch a disgruntled voice from the other side of the door. "Son of a bitch! You aren't even supposed to have a dog in there!" They were gone by the time he got to the door. He wouldn't be able to open it. Instead, he just scratched at the door, wanting out of the hell he was in. Now that his body stopped torturing him, he could focus on the pain in his stomach. The tremendous, animalistic hunger. A ringing phone cuts through the silence of a quiet office. A woman, with her hair tied in a neat little bun, stared at the phone through her glasses as the phone rang and rang. Popping her gum once more, before taking it out of her mouth and dispensing of it, she'd sigh. The phone would need to be answered. It was what she was getting paid to do after all. So, using the same hand she threw the gum out with, she hit a record button on the phone and answered. "Hello, this is Naughton Foods, Susan speaking." She couldn't even fake interest, as the person on the other line shrieked in panic. It was another woman, and she was hard to hear over the chaos of whatever was happening in the background. "Yes, ha ha hi. Fuck," she stuttered and hissed, as the sounds of faint banging could be heard. "I'm sorry, but we recently bought one of your products and—" "Did ya follow the instructions, ma'am?" The woman in the cubicle interrupted, tone still giving away she was waiting to clock out. The woman on the other end didn't answer instantly. Just the sounds of something pounding from far away, followed by nervous wailing, as a result of the aggressive noises. If you got burned from eating beast hunger or are unsatisfied after your meal, you either didn't cook it thoroughly, or you didn't let it sit. Regardless, Naughton Foods cannot be held accountable for these mistakes. "What?" The woman on the other end sobbed out, her tone hurt and confused. "My husband becomes a monster. And all you can tell me is, sorry ma'am. Naughton Foods are not accountable for any discrepancies." Click. The phone would be gently hung up without any passion, anger, or fear. Just the end to another call. The lady leaned some on her desk, her eyes still on the phone. Another sigh left her, this time through her nose, as she picked up the phone and just dialed 9. It rang for a second before a man picked up the phone. Jack Dunn's office. He didn't seem like he was excited to receive any calls. The woman chewed her bottom lip before her shoulders slouched a little. "Mr. Dunn. We got another one cryin', wolf."
beast's hunger, coming to a store, near you, soon.